Ted Radio Australia, welcome, very, very, very welcome indeed to a warm welcome. Okay, get a little temperature to the Genius Zone. Hot welcome, why not? Let's go for gold here. It's Aaron Malloy here with the lovely Terry Messenger. Don't shoot her, she's just the messenger. We are ready for the Genius Zone, and we have a wonderful guest there. But before I do that, in fact, no, what I'll do is I'll throw straight to you there, Terry. Would you like to talk to our lovely guest and introduce them?
I would love to.
Fantastic.
Aaron, and thank you for the great introduction. And I'm about to introduce the next guest, who is Susanna Sweeney, all the way from Ireland. Now, Susanna is a success strategist, Aaron, and my apologies, Susanna Sweeney. That's the most important part. Is a success strategist who has spent more than 25 years. Aaron, you better watch out.
That's a fair whack.
In the world of trauma, being able to get to the root of the issue. And I'm sure you're going to have 1,001 questions to ask her.
I will have. Look, I'm getting them actually ready, actually.
We podcasted, and, I was amazed by how on the spot she was able to help myself. And Susanna does many modalities, including EMDR,
okay,
which is like a rapid eye movement. She does havening, which is a sort of a cross arm, hug yourself and tap while you are healing kind of modality.
Yeah, hugging yourself, that's not strange at all,
I'm
is
trying to speak in layman's terms.
I like it.
And, amongst all of the, the psychological elements and powerful parts that she plays in being the founder of Reparenting. And so with no further ado, hello, Susanna, all the way from Ireland.
Hello, super excited to be here, and thanks for having me, Terry.
Oh, look, it's our pleasure. Well and truly, we've got a few questions for you today because, you've got a pretty interesting little subject there and very much an interesting business, I guess.
Yeah. Shall I kick off with sort of giving a little bit of a preface about it?
Why not?
And then you can ask all your amazing questions.
Okay. I don't know if they're amazing. We'll soon find out.
We'll soon find out. Okay. So, firstly, I guess it would be fair to say, just so the audience can be aware, that, you've obviously, founded the Reparenting method, which is spelt as in a repair with the word parenting on the end of it. So are we learning how to reparent? Are we learning how to go back and reparent ourselves? Can you go into, obviously, detail about, what that's all about?
Love the question, Terry. So reparenting is a term really from psychotherapy, right? Where the idea is that you reparent your inner child. Now, the thing about it is it can take forever and ever and ever. And usually there's no concrete plan as to how they go about it, what exactly they're trying to achieve, what are the goals of this reparenting. It's a very loose kind of a concept. And so I got very frustrated with that sort of thing because that's just not me, hanging out with things forever and ever and not being able to bring people someplace. So it's actually 34 years that I've been in the world of psychotherapy.
Started at the age of 3, yeah?
Your age, Aaron?
Yeah, okay, just check.
No. In my early 20s, I started volunteering in the trauma space, and then I started being employed, and I, fell into that career. But it happened to really suit me, as well as it helping with my own issues that I brought. I really loved the work, and I loved that it kept me away from a world where, there's so much environmental destruction and so much going on driven by industry. And I didn't really want to be part of that. I love being in the space where I could help people.
It's probably fair to say, too, that even though I introduced you as being from Ireland, just in case Aaron was wondering or anybody listening, and we are on radio, by the way, live right now. So, we're really appealing to our listeners as well as our viewers. Susanna was actually brought up in Berlin with the Great Wall. So that's where the accent is kind of coming into play.
I've got to ask then, which side of that wall were you on?
I was on the wrong side of the wall. I was locked in behind it.
Wow.
So I was telling Terry yesterday about it. And so that's a lot of where my story comes from, because that was a world where emotions weren't welcome. So whatever space you were in, and sort of the individual wasn't welcome. It was all about the collective. It was all about society. And so if you had any desires of your own, it was kind of deemed to be decadent and so on. And then
very much frowned upon. Yes.
yeah, and so this kind of climate filtered down into families, filtered down into child rearing in many, many families. And so it did in my own. And that's what left me at, in my teenage years, I would say from about 14, I was very anxious, and I was also pretty depressed. And I went in and out and in and out of that space. And there were times when it was really unbearable and just awful. And so as soon as the wall opened, then on the 9th of November, 89, most of your listeners will have heard about that at least. And as soon as that happened and we had a more liberal society, I looked for help and I went into therapy. And then it just took on a life of its own after that. I tried out many, many different things. Ended up living in Ireland and ended up getting involved in voluntary work in the trauma space. And then it took off from there. So when you're starting into therapy, when you come in the psychotherapy route, you will first meet all the talk-based methods. And I mean, that's still 99% of the market pretty much out there.
Therapy, you mean, right? Talk therapy, yeah.
Talk therapy. There are so many talk therapy methods. The way they are taught can be very academic. And I'm looking at it largely. I know the UK is more, has a more widespread spectrum, and so do the US. But here in Ireland, it was all very streamlined, quite academic, quite rigid. I'm going to use that word. And quite institutionalized. And so there were aspects of it really that I was in conflict with from the word go, that I didn't really like. But, I was still believing in the paradigm, should we say, that by talking with people, we can help them work through their issues and we can help them improve their lives. And so working from that place brought me over the first 5 years or so of my career. But the thing is that when you're in the trauma space, like you see very quickly when things aren't working so well, because that's kind of the more extreme end of it, I suppose, where you really have people that are going to be anxious, that have flashbacks, that are struggling with awful symptoms. And so you're going to see whether something works or not. And so we're talking now the early, mid, late 90s, and towards the late 90s, I suppose it became clear to me that this wasn't going to be all that was needed, that talking basically wasn't enough. Talking is good. It helps you understand things. It helps you have a witness. It helps you have, a safe relationship with someone. And that's all good. But that's not all that's needed.
And
right?
especially with PTSD, like post-traumatic stress disorder, that is a huge one. And when you're dealing with people that have got such ingrained trauma, especially, war vets and people like that, they've got so much trauma in their body, they can't even talk about it. So, going around and doing all this talk therapy, they're almost nursing and rehearsing it. And as you can hear from, this story from Susanna, obviously, Susanna, you've gone on a crusade from your upbringing, from being on the wrong side of that wall in Berlin, and the trauma and everything that you went through. And you discovered some powerful modalities that really are very deep. And what they do, Aaron, is they will allow people to release their trauma from the root, the root cause of it. So Susanna's getting right to the very root of it. And then she's repairing it by I guess installing, is that what you do? Because I know that that's what I do, but do you install the new codes of what people want?
Actually, I don't do that so much. So when you're thinking about how emotional resilience works, and I've looked into a lot of the science of that, it's really that things get plastered on top of it, shall we say. So we're all born pretty resilient, right? And then comes conditioning that isn't beneficial for that. And then what happens is that your natural emotional defense system, which, biology sets us up all right, nobody comes into this life unless you have a difficult birth experience. But metaphorically speaking, nobody comes into this life heavily traumatized. That all happens afterwards.
Yeah.
So what
Although
I
you hear about, I don't know about yourself, but I know that I've heard about people being traumatized in the mother's womb.
Oh, yes,
so
of course.
the
You
mother
have,
goes through trauma,
yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. We have all that. So maybe my metaphor isn't so good, but it's like that stuff is put upon you by experiences,
Yes.
not by biology, is what I'm trying to say. The
Yeah.
biology, so I mean, in terms of natural selection, the better equipped species will always win. And so seeing that humans have evolved as we have, we can assume that we're pretty well equipped. But what happens is that difficult experiences will result in certain encodings in the brain that are very durable, and they really get in the way of us being resilient and acting in resilient ways and being our own best supporters and all of that. So my approach has been more so to clear that up. Now, there's a lot you can do afterwards to build resilience. I wouldn't describe it as putting in new programming. You can do that. It's more like you're teaching skills, maybe, how to do it even better. But a lot of the work is actually clearing up all the stuff that's in the way, clearing that space. And I find that the natural resilience then can move into that
So,
space.
Aaron, I was just going to say, I know you've got some questions.
I
so, I guess what, Susanna is describing here is the fact that, sometimes our success, our personal success,
Sure.
our achievements and everything like that can be blocked by our childhood.
I would agree with that. I'd love to know Susanna's thoughts on that. Would you agree?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
I thought so. Just want to reaffirm on that
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
All right. I mean, look, a lot of us are running around with those roadblocks. Let's face it. Things that happened in our childhood or happened in our past, and we're carrying that luggage around everywhere. I mean, sometimes, I make the joke often. I often feel like Heathrow Airport, the amount of baggage that I've got.
Oh my goodness.
But yes, I know. Just we've got someone in the cheap seats out the back here who is
yes, backstage.
making an absolute nuisance of himself, but he's doing all right. Okay, so look, sometimes in life you've got to do a bit of clean up aisle 4. Let's face it. Okay, clean up the things that are actually blocking us. What techniques would you actually recommend for this? Before I jump into the actual formal questions.
What kind of which would I recommend for it?
So techniques.
Yeah.
Like we did the havening, and I'll go into that in a while.
Okay.
About my own.
Have I jumped?
No, you haven't.
What my answer will be to that. It's not even, and I can show maybe a technique later on, but it's not so much just about techniques and modalities and fixes, because what you have also is, when this stuff comes from childhood, is that it can be very hidden. So it can be there in your everyday behaviors, but it can be so bloody familiar that you won't even see it.
Like a familiar spirit.
Like a familiar spirit, and it feels so much like you that you think, oh, this is me, or this is my personality, and you don't even realize that this is learned behavior and that you can actually get out of your own way if you just know how, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I cover in Reparenting. One of the streams, the first stream, is about diagnostics, actually finding those things, and that includes the things that are very hidden, because if we don't find them, we can't repair them in the first place, right?
May I ask
She does this technically, though. I mean,
Okay.
I cheat and I use the subconscious mind.
Right.
Susanna's actually an expert at diagnosing and literally going into that, to the point of where the root
Actually
cause
digging
starts.
right
Yeah,
and finding the baseline, if you like.
yeah, that's
Okay.
it.
Okay. Can I ask this question? Now, I've jotted it down because I do want to get this nice and clear. Now, if we're talking about success here, how the hell do I know, like, what I actually need to work on in my life? Like, how do I find the stuff that's secretly holding me back?
How do you find it on your own? So, like, one of the things for people to work on their own that I would recommend is keep a journal.
Okay.
Keep a journal and begin to become aware of repetitive patterns that you see yourself doing, where you kind of feel that you're getting in your own way. So you have to kind of train yourself. You have to become disciplined around spotting these things and being honest with yourself, right? About, I mean, you can kid yourself. You can say, oh, no, and make a story up as to why that
There's no
was
weeds in
okay.
the garden, no weeds in the garden, but the garden's full of weeds.
Oh, look,
Yeah.
call the gardener in then. Get yourself a whippersnipper. Find a solution.
Absolutely.
So you start spotting those places where you're actually holding yourself back. You're being brutally honest with yourself about that. And that understanding will help a great deal. And when you have that, then in come the techniques, and then you can work on yourself with something that will help you come out of that space. Because
and Aaron, I might add to that it could also mean relationships, career success.
Sure.
It can mean health. So that's what you mean, isn't it, when you're talking about repetitive patterns, Susanna?
I totally agree. So it's across the whole spectrum. Success is not just success on the business side when I talk about success, but actually for many of my clients, it would be around having this enjoyable life, this holistic life, so being happy with their families, really being able to enjoy the present moment and not just kind of go from achievement to achievement. But and then for other people, it's being blocked on the business side, but it's definitely both streams. It's life and business.
I've often said this before, and this is only something I've learned in my own life in the last couple of years. It's quite new to me because I've always really struggled with gratitude because and I'm not having a go at my parents here, but I was raised in a way where I felt that I had to go from one achievement to another, to another, to another. Like and wonderful parents, don't get me wrong, but that's obviously where they were conditioned to feel that way, right? So for myself, I absolutely gauged myself on those achievements. And unfortunately, that means that even when I was achieving really great things, I never stopped and smelt the roses. I mean, is this kind of winding back? Does this mean that like the 8-year-old version of Aaron is still running the show? Is because he's got some explaining to do if that's
Good
the case.
question.
Well, 8-year-old Aaron is not to blame. Let's say, first of all, kids will absorb whatever there is around them. That's how we're biologically wired. We will download whatever we see the adults doing because we will assume on a biological level that the adults are teaching us what we need to know to navigate life really well. And so we're just absorbing like sponges at that stage. Children's brains are really plastic and they can change on a day-to-day basis. So 8-year-old Aaron will have just downloaded what he saw being done all around him. But you can be programmed that. You can release yourself from that. Go on.
I was going to ask, do you think then that there are elements that Aaron's talking about that may affect his life or impact his life, that where that 8-year-old child needs to be healed?
Yeah, well, that's for Aaron to decide. And if he wants to heal that, then we can work with that and bring 8-year-old Aaron through that. So it kind of it's never something that you can prescribe or say, oh, you should do this or you should do that. It really has to come from the inside, right? And it has to, I suppose, be uncomfortable enough for someone to come for help. And then when they come for help, what I would look for is the feelings, the emotions behind that. Then we work.
What if we're just uncomfortable asking for help?
Yeah.
which
True.
if we didn't feel comfortable asking for help. Is it?
We have some clowning around going on
Yes,
in the
we've
background backstage.
got
We're
some-
talking about trauma here on Edge Radio
Yeah.
Australia, but I can tell you right now, it is a serious subject, and I don't mean to laugh. And look, quite frankly, as you would say,
I would
Aaron,
say.
what I was thinking in terms of the reparenting, and you might need to correct me on this, Susanna, is that if a person is stumbling, they've got fear that's set up of maybe showing up, or they're not quite succeeding in their work or their relationships, or money is hard to come by. Do you think that comes from the child within us, or is that something that when you say reparenting, what do you mean? What does that fully mean?
Yeah, so really great question. Love it. So the way I fell into this, I think that's how I have to backtrack a little bit and tell the story around that. So it's like I've been in the therapy space for 34 years, right? And so I suppose it was about 20 years or so in when it struck me that in that trauma charity I was working for, a lot of people that came with trauma in adulthood first. And so we would work through that, and they would be looking for a resolution. They would be looking to feel better. And when you'd work through the adult piece, things would settle a little bit and they would feel relief for sure. But increasingly, I found that over time, what would happen is that's not the bottom of the barrel, is what we would see. And what came out then was stories from childhood. So there would be things like early abandonment, or maybe being the scapegoat of the family, or maybe growing up in an emotional desert where there was no support, or maybe something called parentification, where you do a role swap with your parents and you're minding your parents. And this all comes in under the umbrella of what's called adverse childhood experiences. And then when I not changed careers, but when I went into self-employment there a few years back, and my clientele changed, and they were more people that came in with mystery anxiety that had started in adulthood. And they would come in with the story. They would say, I was never anxious before, but it started 2 years ago and X event happened, and then I became anxious. But in my opinion, X event, I could already see X event was small. It could be something like stress, increased work stress, or it could maybe be a bereavement too, about someone close by, someone close to their heart who they'd lost unexpectedly. But I could see already that these events couldn't account for the amount of distress they were in. And so the same thing started happening. We started going back, and this is not something I forced, this was something that emerged, where people went back to childhood and found those kinds of adverse childhood experiences. And then when we cleared those up, that was the end of it. And that's when anxiety started to reduce and settle, and ultimately they became free of that sort of chronic level of anxiety, and could resume living their lives in peace and quiet. And that's how reparenting grew, I think. From everything that I see, certainly with my clientele, I would say, I would actually say every single person that I have worked with had a piece there in childhood that then also needed to be cleared up. And so, and that's the repair piece simply means we do it quickly. We don't hang out. We don't spend a lot of time with it, as in years in therapy.
Exactly,
like most people don't want that, right, Terry? Most people just want an improvement quickly. They want something tangible. They don't want weekly appointments forever and ever.
Yeah. And look, also there's the accumulation effect. So, our way we are today is as a result of what happened to us yesterday. So quite often that when we're hitting the wall, or when we're in a crisis, we have this human resilience to keep going. And then it's when we stop and pause that boom, it's like you crash. And then, it's interesting when you have recurring patterns like Susanna's talking about. And I know with a person who it was tangible, he came in to quit smoking, and he smoked 2 packets a day. But
Fair whack.
he said that he'd been in the war, and I said, look, we need to deal with that. He said, oh no, he didn't even want to talk about it.
Mhm.
And the fact is, I convinced him he didn't have to talk about it, because the whole point is it's not about context. It's about the feelings and where we store them in our body, and how we kind of internalize that. So when you hear a lot of modalities, like you were asking
Mhm.
Susanna about a modality before, and we touched on EMDR. So EMDR is kind of like in the world of NLP. It's the sensories of where your eyes are looking
Mhm.
when you're processing. So if your eyes are looking up, you're kind of remembering visually about
Okay.
something.
Because often people say about looking up and to the left, and therefore, oh my God, they're lying.
Yeah,
Right?
I don't really go with that. I mean,
Yeah.
detectives do, and it might be true,
Right.
but we're looking at it as more of a brain process. So
Right.
if someone says to you to remember what someone was wearing yesterday,
Mhm.
you'll probably find that you take your eyes up, unless you know straight away. If you were asked, what did they actually say to you? What was the exact words they said? That's when, you can be looking across.
Sure.
And that is where the brain processes audible. And if a person's in their feelings and they're really anxious, quite often they're looking down and they're in their body, or
I agree
it
with
could
that.
be remembering a good or a bad feeling. It doesn't necessarily either one. So what Susanna actually does, and I'm familiar with this modality, is with EMDR, you're kind of like scrambling that process and getting people's eyes to move in all the different directions whilst they're actually thinking about their trauma.
Okay.
And that brings me to the next question that I've got for you, Susanna, because you understand very well that trauma is trapped in the body. So can you talk us through how that works, where you're kind of helping that? And like when you were doing havening with me, we can't do it on radio because of airtime, but obviously with havening, you're kind of touching yourself and you're tapping and you're releasing. Can you explain that process so our viewers and listeners can kind of get the whole gist of it?
Yeah, so let me start with the body thing, right?
Okay.
So when I started into body-centered work, which was the mid to late 90s, back then the theory was that trauma gets stored in the body. And in the last 15 years, the neuroscience we've had since then, it's become clear that it only just manifests through the body, but it's not stored there. It's stored in the brain. So let's get that one clear, right? So what that
Okay.
means, this is important because it means that actually all those modalities that are helpful are actually working with the brain. They're telling the brain that it's safe. They're communicating that this is outdated information that the brain no longer needs to hold on to. And so this is something they all have in common, whether that's EFT.
But aren't the feelings trapped in the body? Aren't they held, like the emotions of the memory, aren't they held in the body?
Well, so your amygdala is the one that generates emotions. That's the brain, a tiny little gland in your limbic system in the brain. And that's the one that generates emotions, especially those to do with survival, the quite high intensity ones, like fear, like anger, they come from there. But when you look at the biology, actually all our emotions have to do with survival, even peace and love and all of that, because they're social bonding emotions. And once you understand that all our emotions have to do with survival, you start working in different ways. And you start taking them a lot more seriously, because then you realize that emotions can never win over thought. Because thought is just, in terms of evolution, thinking is just a complete latecomer. Abstract thought came maybe 100,000 years ago when we had this event called cognitive revolution. So it's a luxury that we have. Like no other species has that, right? We're the absolute kings here of evolution. We have that, but emotions are always, always, always going to overrule your thinking. And that's an absolute given.
Because
And
I was
so-
kind of wondering whether it's, when you have a bad feeling, you might feel it in your body, but usually you're telling yourself something, aren't you? You kind of got these repetitive thoughts going around and around in your head
Right.
that's
Yeah.
then causing the feelings, yeah?
Well, I think it's a chicken and egg debate to be had. I think
comes
more
first?
in my recent understanding over the last few years, I think more often it's actually the other way around, that the emotion is actually there first, and then your thoughts fall in line with the emotion.
Gosh, I'm not 100% sure on that one, but I'll take that in because you are an authority on this topic.
So start
But
observing it, right? Start observing it and start. So say, for example, now this might not be true for you, but how you make decisions, really looking into that. So say when somebody puts a piece of cake in front of you, how do you make that decision whether you're going to eat it or not?
I
And
guess you do get a feeling, but you also get a word in your head that might say yum, or yum, or yuck,
Yeah,
or you know what I mean?
Well,
So-
I think you make the intellectual decision to eat it or not. You might have the emotional want for it, but
Yeah.
ultimately up here is the
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
place
that's the way I
decisions
would have thought. I would have thought
Yeah,
it's
exactly. So
and
what
then-
you're doing then is you're doing something called top-down regulation. So you have the emotion, you have the desire, you have the want, and then you're using your cognitive thinking to down-regulate the want and to go, no, but I was on this plan where I'm going to eat healthy. And so do I really want this piece of cake or not? No, in this instance, I don't want it. So you've talked yourself down,
Gotcha.
right?
that is so interesting. And look, can we go into a little bit about the havening and what you actually did with me? Do you have another? Is there another question on
There is
there?
another question I did want to
Yeah.
get to, but
Do you want to do
yeah,
the havening first, and
if we
then
could, yeah, that'd be great.
Is that
Yeah,
okay?
yeah,
Cool.
so.
So obviously,
So let me explain this piece, where this kind of work comes in.
yeah,
So about 15 years ago, neuroscience started producing research on a connection between touch and the brain,
Okay.
and how touch is actually really important for brain development, even when you're in the womb. So as a baby in the womb, you're rubbing up against the walls of the womb, and that touch has been shown to stimulate the brain development of the fetus. So isn't that amazing? Then we can use that in adult life to reverse some of the resilience processes that have gone wrong because of certain experiences, right? And so that's why Havening Techniques is touch-based. And touch is just, an EFT is as well, EFT tapping.
yeah,
And so the two together have what I think is the most powerful way of a back door into that limbic system, which is really responsible for encoding a lot of those pieces of programming where the programming has gone wrong.
yeah.
And so in Havening Techniques, there are 3 areas for touch. There are your palms, and I'm demonstrating this here on the screen. Your listeners won't be able to see that, but it's the palms brought together and rubbing against one another. You can stroke in a straight kind of a motion, or you can stroke in a circle. And of course, the palms are really clever because you can do that even when you're, say, on public transport or you're in company and nobody's going to bat an eyelid because everybody is going to think it's the most natural thing in the world, right? People do it all the time.
Yes,
So-
anchoring is so powerful. And just to put it into context,
Mhm.
so obviously because we're on podcast, we were able to do a little bit of a demo.
Sure.
And so Susanna asked me to think of something that was bothering me.
Right.
And so by actually doing a crossed arm, so you cross your arms over as if you're giving yourself a hug,
Okay.
and you gently rub your arms and you state exactly what you're feeling, but then you transmute it and turn it around into a positive. So
Right.
whatever you're feeling, like if you're angry with someone, you
Mhm.
might have that anger and you might be saying, I feel annoyed that this is what's happened.
Mm.
And then she asked me the question, well, what's the first thing that comes as a positive? And I said, you're all right. Okay.
Okay.
And she said, well, just keep saying that. So after having that kind of thought, you're anchoring yourself, you're stating the truth,
Mhm.
and then after that you're saying, I'm all right, I'm all right.
Okay.
And then you keep on saying it. And then I
What,
guess
until you believe it?
until it's something to do, well, maybe Susanna can actually explain that, but with the EFT it's the
Mhm.
same. So you're tapping through, but no matter what, you're not trying to say that there's no weeds in the garden when there
Yeah,
is.
sure.
So you are stating, even though, so you're always saying, even though I feel this way, or even though I feel broke, or even
Mm.
though I feel like I have that void in my relationship, or that sadness, even though I truly love and value myself, because human beings need to feel loved
Yeah,
and
most definitely.
need to know that they're valued as well. Perhaps you can kind of extend on that from the more scientific point of view, if you will, Susanna.
Yeah, well, maybe just from kind of a more logical point of view,
Mhm.
in terms of, so what we did, Terry, and yeah, great metaphor about the weeds in the garden, and I'll go with that. So the first thing you do is you pull all the weeds up in the garden. Now, with you, that happened really quickly because, of course, you do a lot of work on yourself, and so that didn't take very long at all. But that's the first thing you want to do. Yeah. So you want to spend the time that it takes to pull up those weeds first.
Yeah.
And then you nurture with the positives until that feels stable, until you feel you're 100% behind the positive statement. That would be the logical progress that you would use. With definitely with EMDR, with havening techniques, that's the route you would go.
Okay. Do you mind if I fire into that question that we've got there?
Yeah, we've got
So
time for another
we
question.
can sneak it in. Why not?
I reckon.
Now, if someone like me wants to become more successful, let's go. What is the number one modality?
Go.
Yeah, absolutely. Go, go, go. What's the number one modality that you'd actually use on me? And does it depend on what's underneath the problem, or the problem you're trying to actually solve?
Yeah. So the first thing that you and I, Aaron, would do is we would get you to fill in a long form.
Oh,
And then we would have a long conversation about that form.
Yep.
And we would find the things that are blocked and that are trapped. And we would set up what I call the game plan inside my program, so that we could be sure that you're not wasting any time and you know exactly what you'll be working on. And I know exactly what's coming and the little projects that we will have to work through. And then we will use processes as is right. It depends. It's very, very much tailor-made because everybody is different.
Oh, for sure.
And,
Yeah.
right. And the issues can present in different ways. So it's not always the same kind of technique you would use. You would really look at where someone is at and what they can do and what's best for them. And so like you would have a different entry level, say, to Terry, who does this stuff all the time, right? And so that's how I would pick between my selection of stuff at my disposal. And then we would work with that. Now, in the therapy groups that I have, or like I call it therapy because I'm so used to that term, in the reparenting group call that I have once a week, we use a lot of havening techniques and a lot of EMDR. And I bring the group through processes in such a way that nobody there has to disclose, like nobody else in the group will know what exactly they're working on, because a lot of these people are very private. They don't want that out there. And a lot of this stuff is very sensitive and very traumatic and so on. So
I do have a little interruption here, because I think this is going to be very, very relevant to our listeners and viewers. So we have your masterclass that is available, and we are going to drop that in the comments. Now, we will try and get that across for everyone. However, if you're on radio, you can certainly chime in and email us at what is the email address for Edge Radio?
info@edgeradioaustralia.com, or on the website there's actually a link that you can go, boom, fill in your information, away you go. But otherwise, doing it the old-fashioned way with the old typing, it is info@edgeradioaustralia.com.
And what we will do is we will send you out this invitation for a free masterclass. And I'm also going to do a little bit of a donation too. My virtual assistant's going to drop that in the comments on my personal profile if you're watching on social media. If you are listening on Edge Radio Australia, of course, we've given you the instructions. And also you'll be able to get a link for the Maverick book, which is a really powerful ebook, if I don't mind saying myself.
You like that one?
Yeah. So how are we going to conclude on this show today? Because we don't want to miss anything really important. So have you got another question? Or, will I hit Susanna up with the big question that I love to ask?
I'm going to say something very quickly, if I may. During this discussion, this conversation, I'll be absolutely honest with you. Something from my own past, from my own childhood, has really popped up.
Wow.
And it's kind of smacked me in the back of the head. Something that I've tried to put away.
You mean Travis didn't need to do that?
Travis is the greatest distraction in the world. But no, something actually genuinely happened to me during this podcast. And I think to myself, geez, I now look at some of the reactions and some of the things I do in life, and you think to yourself, there's the seed. That's where it was.
Yeah.
So that's just what I wanted to say.
Maybe we can talk about that.
Maybe we could.
After the show.
Or maybe I could just suck my thumb and rock back and forth. Right? That'll be fine.
Please don't do that. We've got Carter in the corner over there. So look, I really do want to ask you this question, because there is so much. You are such a wealth of knowledge. The whole idea of a lot of people out there that are listening that truly do want to succeed, and whatever success means to have a fulfilled life, you can contact this gorgeous lady. And the question that I would have to conclude is there something you want to reiterate, or maybe something you'd like to add to what we have spoken about here today, Susanna?
Yeah, so maybe to say to your audience and to you, Aaron, as well. So it's like when you've tried lots of different things, and those lots of different things you've tried in order to get through where you're blocked in life, or where you're discontented, or where you're unhappy in life, those many, many things you've tried haven't really worked. Then this is another thing you can try, is working through the childhood stuff, because I promise you it will be rich territory. And that's not just Aaron on his own. I think that's for most people. Probably there's something there that's really worthwhile dealing with and transforming, and then your entire outlook on life can change after that. Don't underestimate it, because childhood is the main time in life for programming, for conditioning, for setting you up for life. And there is so much that children absorb with their limited resources that's just simply faulty. They derive the wrong type of information from what's happening around them. And then when you are able to correct that in adulthood, it's just amazing how much changes.
It's such a gift. Oh, thank you so much for that. And I know what a blessing this kind of work is. I don't know where I'd be without it. Probably wouldn't be sitting here right now even. I reckon. I honestly don't. I've got, there's talk therapy, and there's a place for talk therapy. There's counselling, and there's a place for it, and I have the utmost respect for it. However, for this deep trauma stuff, this is the way to really unleash and unlock some of those demons. And
why are you looking at me when you say demons? Jeez, tough crowd. Oh,
Sorry,
became Aaron's
this
therapy
is
session.
terrible to end the show today. So, Susanna, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. Any words from you, Miss Arizona?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Susanna. I've actually put the details down there on the bottom of the screen, in fact, and thank you to Cara in the background who's slotted those up for me. So we've got the information about the workshop. Yeah, get amongst it, be part of it, and thank you very much for being part of the Genius Zone here on Edge Radio Australia.
Thank you for having me. It's been a really enjoyable hour.
Our pleasure. Thanks very much.